I'd like to welcome everybody. It's great that you could spend a couple of minutes here. I think we've got a great interview today. And so, as a Vistage chair, I get to meet an awful lot of great resources to help Vistage members solve problems, grow their business. And today, we'll probably spend another 15 minutes or so with one of those great resources, Chris Cosmos. So Chris is a co-founder and CEO of Evolvesquads, and he's been doing outsourcing for, I'd say close to 25 years. And I've spent a little time with him, and I think he's got some great insights for a lot of business owners about how to balance resources, especially in the environment we're in today where labor is very tough to come by. So with that, Chris, hi, thanks for spending time with us today.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's great. So let's kind of just jump right into it.
Right.
So, you say outsourcing. What is outsourcing?
Got a lot of, it's very ambiguous for sure. If you take it with, think about it as a babysitter comes home when you're young and you have a family and you want to go out on a date with your wife or your husband, and you have a babysitter come in for a couple hours. In a sense, you're outsourcing the supervision of your young children as you're out on a date. Outsourcing covers everything. It definitely has some negative connotations with respect to labor, but it's alive and well, and it's not going away. It's global in nature right now, and it's not just for traditional call centers. You have a stereotype where you outsource the help desk, if you will, and it's to some foreign land far away, and the language is not clear, and there's breakup in the communication. It covers quite a lot now within business.
Gotcha. So I hear the term near sourcing. Outsourcing. So what's the difference between
Very simple. Great question. Very simple. When you hear offshore essentially means any work done over an ocean from the United States. Really, that's all it means. So if you're offshore, you're doing work in Europe, Eastern Europe, India, Africa, Australia, for that, if you're doing it there, for that matter. Near shore, all that means it's either Canada or Latin America, all of Latin America. That's essentially the difference between offshore and near shore outsourcing. That's it's a term that comes out. It gets confused many times, but a big near shoring is becoming more popular, mainly because the time zones are obviously very similar versus outsourcing something from the Midwest, as an example, to India. There's obviously a 12, 13-hour time difference.
So how the heck do you do this? So, mid-market business owners, they don't have a ton of resources. A lot of them, you just don't have people going, well, why don't you investigate this, study this, hire people, do this. And so give us a little bit of a snapshot about where the best place to start doing some outsourcing in your business, and then how do you actually approach it? And from that perspective, you don't have a ton of resources to study and do all this.
Right. You're a small shop, and you're looking at advantage, whether it's kind of round the clock services, if you will. That might be one. Cost effectiveness would be another one. How you do this is, the first thing is you have to think about, what do you want to outsource? In my world, it's traditional software development, which is big multi-billion-dollar business out there. But there's other things to be outsourced as well, from a help desk situation to marketing to HR services. So really getting an idea of what you want to outsource first is probably the first thing you want to think about. The good news and bad news, it's an extremely commoditized industry. There are literally thousands of companies that do, quote, outsourcing, if you will.
Oh, so really? I didn't realize what that meant.
Yeah, it's huge. It's a big, think of the Accentures of the world. For every Accenture or Infosys or Tata, or, you go down the list of these big companies. For every Boston Scientific, all these big companies that do consulting, they're now doing a lot of outsourcing. And there's outsourcing hourly, there's outsourcing by project. There's a lot of different ways to scope the outsourcing project, if you will. But for every big company that you've heard, IBM outsources. IBM Global Services is what it's called, and they outsource. And so, and that's a big part of their business. Microsoft, these companies outsource.
Yeah,
So,
and I understand that, but I'm just a mid-market business
right,
kind of person, right?
right,
So
right.
maybe I have 50 people in my company,
Okay,
75 people in my company. How the heck do you get your arms around it? These people are all around the world. So
that's right. And
what's the first step?
typically those people are getting cold called daily by services that provide by companies that provide these types of services. So whether you do it cold and you're willing to take a call and you develop a conversation with someone regarding the services, the outsourcing services they provide. Remember, outsourcing is we talked about nearshore and offshore, but there's also, if you want to use a temp, think of Kelly girls 30, 40
Yeah,
years ago, 50, whatever, whenever they started. That's very similar. You outsource the work to a Kelly girl, if you will. That's a term that
right.
was used back then. And they came in because your receptionist, let's say, was on maternity leave, or they went on holiday, or whatever it might be. You need someone to come in and replace it. So it's a similar concept. To answer your question, you need to, like everything in business, in my opinion, you need to build a relationship with that provider of that service you want. And there's pitfalls, as we discussed earlier, to doing something like that, in terms of you're working with someone you don't trust, they're not part of your team. Let me just tell you, I like you mentioned, I've been doing this a long time. These companies out there should provide white glove service. I mean, especially in this market, to get a random person to reply to a cold call, meaning a random customer prospect, say, yeah, I'm interested. I'd like to outsource. I'd like to talk to you about outsourcing my marketing department, let's say, and talk to me about that. That the provider, it should be doing backflips, being very excited about, oh my God, I have an opportunity. We're with a new client. And so that the level of expectation from a delivery standpoint, from a service standpoint, from a cost standpoint, everything should be extremely high. Because if it's not, you go to the next person that's calling you.
So yeah, I've had a Vistage member of professional services that had 30 virtual assistants helping him with the back office, and it's amazing the system they built. But I tell you, one of the first pitfalls is, how do you find a reliable provider? Because you're dealing overseas, you're in the Philippines, you
That's
could
right.
be in India, and how do you know that that company is going to be the reliable company that you're looking for, and it's just not going to take your money, and then you'll never find them again?
That's right. You don't, like, you need to do your research. You need to build some trust with someone. Personally, I'm big on, I think I discussed this with you. In this day and age, in the old day, when I say the old days, back in the mid 90s, when I got involved in downtown San Francisco, you would just go to an office building down the block, go up on the 15th floor, knock on the door and see if they wanted the services. I mean, that's how it was. And if they said, yeah, you take them to lunch and you build rapport and you build a relationship, you get a little business and it grows from that. That was very typical. Things are crazy now because of COVID and this
Right.
type of technology we're talking about. So it's extremely important early on to build a relationship, to the point of the provider. You have choices. The provider, there's hundreds and hundreds of providers in the United States. If you're nervous about not working with someone based out of India, for example, or based out of Ukraine, for example, and you want to work with someone in the States, that gets you a little bit more comfortable. I would argue that prospect should say, look, I want to work with you. I have X amount of business I think I can give you, but I would like to meet you. And I would like you to come out and meet with me on your dime, meaning the provider's dime, and the provider should do it, as far as I'm concerned. If it makes fiscal sense to do that. There,
So what you're really saying is, having an intermediary locally here, like yourself, like Evolvesquads, is really important to vetting the people that are going to be doing the work on the other
it's
side.
again, yeah, like in business in general, you want to trust your partner. The tricky part with outsourcing, one of the main parts, assuming everything's done equally, everything's done fairly, meaning there's a good bond, meaning you return the phone call when you say you're going to do, and you do what you're going to say you're going to, those sorts of things. Those are all the tricky part with outsourcing. You're dealing with human beings. So we had an instance, it happened last week. We have a gentleman who's a developer, very, very good. I'm not going to give any names, whatnot, but he's a developer and he's on with one of our larger clients. and everything's going. He's been on, we call it on billing. He's been developing for our client for about 6 months. His cousin, who's his best friend, tragically passed away. Young guy, right? So he missed work, and he missed a lot. He missed about 8 days, I want to say, of work because of this tragedy. So that stuff happens all the time. It's just human. We're human beings. So being aware of that. I mean, the same thing. You have a full-time employee that sits down the hallway in another cubicle, and that person loses a loved one. They're going to be out of work as well. So it's
right. How the heck do you vet these people?
Correct.
Halfway around the world. How do you do? I know you're doing it a long time. You must have.
Yeah, it's true.
Any secret sauce away?
Hell, I'll give anything away. The internet has flattened out the industry, meaning the barrier to entry to our industry right now, outsourcing in general, is very low. So you got to be careful. You got to be careful. Anybody with an internet connection could hang up their shingles and say, I'm a recruiter, I'm an outsourcer. You could work through me. I'm going to get you 10 people in the Philippines or 10 people in India, and they can do whether it's development or back office support, whatever it might be. You have to be very careful with that. So we have a very standard, the majority of our internal people are what we call researchers and fulfillment officers. They spend an exorbitant amount of time screening our candidates, but it's an imperfect science. Again, human beings are involved. You do the very best you can. A scenario is you hire someone that's worked for you for a couple of years with a client. They finish a project. They're a trusted partner, the candidate, if you will, and then you put them on another project. And hey, this guy's worked for us for 2 years at XYZ project. So think of it very similar to what we would do here normally in the old, 20 years ago when you would hire people and they'd come into your office. There's a lot of similarities, even though the work is getting done 5, 6, 7,000 miles away.
Yeah. So what happens? Let's say I'm a mid-market business owner, and I say, hey, I'm going to try this on my own. I was on the internet, and I can liaison with www.philippines.hire.com or something like that. And so what's the pitfalls of doing that? And so what would somebody who decides, well, I'm a pretty adventurous kind of business owner, or my HR staff is, and so I'm going to give it a shot.
That's right.
What do they got to be really careful with?
God bless them. Every now and then it works, but the issues there are you're going to get, think of it, anybody who's got an internet connection around the world at this point can apply for that job. So you are going to get inundated with, especially if you offer something that might be more than the standard market where they live, which typically it will be. So now you're going to get thousands and thousands. I mean, think about it. Internally right now in America, candidates are very frustrated with HR departments and talent acquisition departments at companies around the country. They don't, you do your cover letter and your resume and you send everything in you're supposed to, and you sit back and kind of wait either, yeah, we want to interview, or thanks, but no thanks. You don't even get that. I mean, that's very typical. There's very little, that's very common. So if you want to venture out and do it your own, you got to be careful, because you are going to get literally thousands of resumes. Probably you'll get tons of resumes. And how do you handle saying no to 940 of them and yes to the so you go through, there's a lot of work to be done. Outsourcing, it's one of the upsides. It saves you a lot of time. It's very time effective.
Yeah, I can imagine. If you get the intermediary, if you do it yourself, you got to figure
That's right. That's
the
right.
money, the pay, exchange rates may get in the middle of this.
All that, yeah. There's a lot of hoops to jump through if you want to do it, and companies do it. Risk mitigation is a big, even for a small company, 50 employees, right? They don't want anything to do with any employment law in Brazil, as an example. And that's fairly typical. I'm going to outsource. That's a big reason why a company will outsource it. So you're going to pay extra, obviously, for the work being done, but now you have no risk associated with that consultant, if you will, living in Brazil from an employment law.
How about legal? Is there any legal issues that you run into using outsourced labor for work?
Oh, sure. There's a lot of issues you have to consider. In many countries now, a lot of these candidates are incorporating themselves. So they would essentially have a corp to corp relationship with the provider or with the end client in America. And that's a good thing for the end client, because now it's corp to corp. There's still some issues involved, but it's very common. There are, I don't know, I should have, there are billions and billions of dollars being spent every year on, I mean, if you just call it outsourcing, Google it. I'm sure it's billions and billions of dollars. Everything, like I said, from software development, projects, time and materials within software, down to call centers and help desk and back office and cold callers and recruiter. There's just a plethora of work that whatever the internet can provide, that workers can do it in different parts of the world now, if you need an internet connection.
Gotcha. Well, I think we're about out of time, Chris. You're my go-to guy when Vistage members ask me, hey, I'm thinking about virtual assistants. I'm thinking about this kind of stuff. And so, it's for me, and in the Vistage world, it's really all about having those right resources that are experts in an area. When it comes to outsourcing, 25 years worth of experience. Boy, I tell you, I know you know all the angles here about what you got to be concerned with risk and what the benefits are. Hey, so if anybody that's watching us today would want to get in touch with you, how would they do in you and Evolve?
Yeah, thank you. My phone number, hell, call me. It's kind of, again, it's very old school. I believe in the power of the pen. And so my phone number is 415-819-4785. And my email is chris.cosmos@evolvesquads.com, all one word, Evolvesquads with an S.com. Anybody, feel free. I'm kind of an open book, and there's plenty of business out there. And if anybody wants some advice or what, I'd be more than happy. Hey, Dave told me to call you. I'll definitely chat with him. No problem at all.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate that insight, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks. Good man. Thanks,
everybody. Thanks for tuning in today.